Hey guys, welcome back on the channel again. Today I want to teach you one very interesting gambit. It's called Humphrey Bogart Gambit. You certainly know who the guy was. He was a famous actor in the early 90s who got like a couple of Oscars, I believe, for the film Casablanca and some more. And I was positively surprised with the quality of his game. Played back to 1933 when he came up with the following gambit. I'd also like to point out for all of you, and there are like a big bunch of people who sent me emails and very positive requests and like critics about the Keanu Hiva gambit, you're going to like the Humphrey Bogart Gambit as well. Thank you all for donations. Lately, we're just like kind of exploding as a channel, and that's good. Especially I can announce we're going to have some Twitch sessions and we're going to have appearances on the Chessbra as well. Let's get started with this, and it begins with d4, knight f6, and believe it or not, g4. Of all the top guys who played this gambit, I realized that Timur Garev, talented GM from United States, played it a couple of times. Then Ginger GM Simon Williams used it a couple of times as well. And there were like a whole bunch of games played on a pretty good level in correspondence chess by really good guys who went with this gambit. There were like even some interesting tournaments, like thematic tournaments on d4 knight f6 g4. And I chose some interesting stuff for you. Of course, the main line will be where black captures, but before we reach the main line with the knight takes g4, I just have to show you what happens with all those side variations. Let's get started with probably the most recent high level example played on chess.com between MWL, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, and VE back to 2019. The guy played g5. I found that game, and by the way, what you're about to see is like completely crazy game that reminds more like Fischer's random 960 chess than this, let's just say, regular chess itself. After knight f3, VE played h5, g takes h5, g4, knight a5, rook h5, and for example here, what is already a lot better if plays e4. He didn't do that. He played knight c3 and now played another interesting move, b5, and after b4, c5. I mean, the game is complete madness. I'm not trying to persuade you to play like this with both white and black, but basically it's just interesting to check it out because it's full of original moves. Played bishop f4 to jump off with this knight, for example, to g6, and after d6 played knight takes g4. This guy played knight a5, threatening the bishop, bishop g3, threatening both the knight on g4 and the bishop on g3 with f4. And now another shocking reaction by MWL, played e4, played knight d2, and I already have to say that white had a lot better position in that game. Eventually he managed to win the game. I kind of like this game, even though it was like very weird, original. And by the way, MWL is known as that kind of player who also likes open positions and lots of tactics. This was a nice example, but I doubt anyone will play g5 against you. Let's go to the next move. Next move against this gambit is if they don't try to accept the gambit and play d6. Here I chose a correspondence game by a pretty good and experienced correspondence player with a pretty good results there, who played like g5, knight d7, and played e4. What is this? This reminds me on some Philidor positions when they play e5, where our pawn hasn't been taken yet on g4, like in some of the Philidor g4 positions, but he actually pushed it up to g5 all the way, and this can be only an improved version of the Philidor game. He now played an interesting move, d5. You don't have to do that. You can play knight f3, you can play knight c3, but I kind of like closing the center, playing d5. and limiting the scope of the dark square bishop. After knight b6, knight c3, knight a6, and now played bishop to e3. I very much like White's development here. White has more space, will follow up with the queen d2 and long castle afterwards to complete development, overprotect the pawn on g5, make long castle, and that's exactly what happened in this game. After queen d2, bishop e7, f3, f5, g takes, bishop takes, and long castles. We could stop here and already say, and here White has a satisfying position. And White really does have a satisfying position. His king is safer, development better. He's got a pretty open king side for his actions. This has to be nice for White. After queen e7, king b1, h6, what happened right now I find very interesting. He decided to take on a6 to give up the bishop here in order to be able to force this pawn to go on a5, which definitely looks as a weakness. And now he didn't go for that pawn. He played knight g on e2, followed by knight g3 and knight h5, chasing the dark square bishop away. It's not about only chasing that bishop away. Somehow bishop on f6 was a good defensive piece in terms of defending the center, the g7 pawn, and closing the f file like this. So what's gonna happen there? After knight a4, he captured and decided to take on f6. After queen f6, broke the center with f4. This is a very nice game because it shows that you don't always have to win in 15 to 20 moves. Here, White had a very perspective middle game, and the way to, for example, if somebody ever plays and puts that bishop on f6 to know how to break the position. After he takes bishop d4, I guess all of you who are well, who have a nice experience with this gambit will go with e5, open e-file, and afterwards play rook h to e1, in which case you would be able to take advantage of the exposed king on e8. After king d7, queen f5, king d8, d6, and black resigned. So that happens when they play d6. What happens if they play h6? h6 also in a way stops your g5 idea, and this could look like Trompovsky if you decide to play g5, f takes, bishop g5, in which case black would have an open h-file while he would have open g-file maybe for some bishop g2 ideas. Usually it's good for white because when the pawn comes to d5 against the bishop on g2, you should usually play bishop g5, knight c3, and break in the center with e4. Although that's not my plan, I don't want to teach you that. I still vote for Gambit here, so I still suggest you to play knight c3. And after you play knight c3, you're ready to go with e4, in which case h6 turns out to be a weakness. So after d5, which makes perfect, sense, you just go with g5. There is also a possibility to play h3, to play more solid, and afterwards to play bishop g2, bishop f4, h3, knight g on e2, or knight f3, knight e5. Those are different plans. My suggestion and my vote goes to g5. I just want to tell you one thing before I continue. I'm not going to show you in previous videos or lectures exact order moves. In this gambit, you just have to rely more on your attacking, aggressive, and initiative instincts. So here, I'm just going to show you a couple of most interesting games with, for example, most typical plans where you would be able to learn how to attack, what to do, how to play, and in certain type of positions, how to break their defenses. After g5, h takes, bishop g5, now they have two options, to play bishop f5 or e6. Those who play bishop f5 and there is like perfect reasoning for this move. Before they complete development with e6, they first want to come out with a light square bishop. You play bishop g2, you threaten bishop f6, knight e5. They have to play e6, and you play queen d2. Take a look at this game. After knight bd7, f3, this is what I told you previously, you go with e4 in most of these cases. A bishop g4 came there to stop the long castle. But after h3, knight g2, knight g3, white chased away the light square bishop, or just wanted to get rid of it along this diagonal so he could finally make castles. After queen a5, took on h5, and just like in Rauser's Sicilian defense, supported the bishop on g5, played bishop f3, and played long castle. This happened in another correspondence game, and I'm not going to show you like the complete game. It's absolutely enough up to this point. White has a perfect development, full compensation. Actually, there is no even compensation because white is not down any material. You have a bishop here, safe king, and if you ask me, I wouldn't hesitate to play this position with white pieces. There is also continuation when they play e6 without coming out with that bishop with bishop f5. It also has its own reasons because you can play f3 and e4 with tempo. So after queen d2, knight c6, long castles, bishop e7, bishop g2. Once again, you can play like plenty of other possibilities if you don't like this one, like knight f3 first, like f3 and e4 first. But I'm just showing you most interesting examples and, in my opinion, model games for Humphrey Bogart Gambit. So after knight h5, h4 reminds me on Trompowsky with h4, f6, bishop e3, knight h3, and this knight goes towards f4. After bishop a6, played knight f4, and after queen d7, played bishop h3, weakening this pawn on e6. After knight f4, bishop f4, castles, white reacted in the most aggressive fashion and played d5. Take a look at this one. Take a look at the bishop pair, weak light squares, which brought in game Lindemann Miller almost winning position for white. And finally, before we check the main line, let's just check anti Humphrey Bogart Gambit or Humphrey Bogart rejected. For example, if you don't want to accept the gambit and if you play d5. In my opinion, your opponents will either play against you knight takes g4 or they will play this move d5. There is also a small possibility that they will play g6 and d6. It's a part of the same thing as we've seen in that game previously after d6. But I expect most of the games to have experience with d5. You always have to chase that knight away with g5. And they have two options, to play knight e4 and knight e7. Those who play knight e7, you play bishop g2. And whether they play c6 or a6, e4. You have a better development, better control of the center, and white certainly has, thanks to this bishop on g2, slightly better development because the light square bishop has some problems with its development as well. And when they play knight e4, I especially like this one and find it critical. You have to go f3, knight d6, and knight c3. Once again, I have to mention that Trompowsky, because in many variations on Trompowsky, something very similar happens. You just go with this early knight c3 without moving your pawn from c2, defend this pawn, attack this pawn on d5, and now they have to commit themselves. They have to play e6 or c6. It also depends if your opponent is more like Slav type of player, but okay, if he's Slav type of player, I guess he won't play first move knight f6, but anyways, if he likes more solid positions, he's going to play c6. Or if he's like French type of player, then they will play e6 here. Those who like Karakan, they will play c6. You play e4, f takes, d takes, f takes, g6. Take a look once again, game by correspondence play Stammer, who once again played a very nice system, bishop f4, and played bishop e5. Surprisingly, he went into this type of middle game where he just wants to get rid of this bishop on g7 because it looks like the most dangerous piece in black's conception. So after like castle, bishop g7, king g7, knight f3, bishop g4, rook g1. In my opinion, it's a little bit better this, but anyways, you'll play bishop e2, move the knight to e5, and trade the light square bishops off. After bishop f3, queen f3, knight d7, long castles, bishop h3, and what happened in the game I like so much, because I like to attack. You could have seen that by now. But look the way he came up with the attack here. Took on d7, played queen h3 attacking this rook, came with this rook g4, and this guy was already like almost lost. Problem was that after knight c4 he blundered queen h6 and rook h4, but I already think that after rook g4 this is a position with a very serious problems for black, because I don't see a good defense of queen h6, rook h4 except h5. If that happens, you're just going to take king goes on h7, double up like both of these rooks on the f file, and probably sacrifice here and win the game. Well, you also have e5, kicking the knight away, playing knight a5 and knight g5. Nice win. In another game was e6. It's more French type of continuation. e4, d takes, f takes, bishop e7, pretty much the same. Just previously we saw c6, and here we're analyzing position with the light square bishop being locked on c8. After b6, rook g1, bishop b7, bishop d3, logical development by white, bishop f4, a3 to stop knight b4 to keep the light square bishop, which is essential piece for attack afterwards. And after rook d8, d5, knight b8, played knight h4. I like this knight h4 move because we're not like too familiar with, especially I'm not. I like to attack, and I know so many type of positions, but usually I don't play knight h4 to attack. But look what he did. Thanks to that knight on h4, he decided the game. He played knight h4. I would play knight e5, for example, because we all were taught put the pieces into the center of the board. Knight h4, e takes d5, played knight e5. If black takes on d5, he takes d5 with a bishop pair advantage and amazing attack on the king. Bishop f8, knight f6, king h8, queen h5 threatening mate on h7, h6, and boom, queen takes f7. You can't stop queen g8 checkmate, and if most of you just wonder like, what the hell is this? What if I take the queen? Then don't forget this nice mating net with two knights. This was a game between Rittenhouse and Norman back to 1992. And now it's time to analyze the main line of the Humphrey Bogart Gambit. It's g4, knight takes g4. I'll first start with a famous game played by a famous actor against somebody, where actor played f3. I once again have to say that I was very pleased and positively surprised with the quality of his chess in this game. Played e4, d6, played bishop e3, knight c3, queen d2, and all of you who have who are actually familiar with 150 attack type of games or English attack type of games, you guys wouldn't have too much problems to say, hey, this is almost the same. But the only difference, except those variations where we sack the h pawn to open the h file, here the g file is open. Sometimes having the g file open is also good. Humphrey Bogart played bishop d3. And this guy played e5, d5, and played knight b4. I don't like bishop d3, let's be honest. I would keep my bishop being there on f1, especially nowadays when you develop like lots of nice attacking styles with the bishop on f1. But okay, he decided to keep this bishop at all costs, played a3, played h4 to probably sack another pawn, and played knight g on e2. When black went for f5, he stuck this bishop on g5, and after bishop f6, played another move that is very likely to be one of the decisive moves in these games. He opened up the game and the king side with f4. After e takes, knight takes, knight takes, queen takes, f takes, and he once again played a nice move, bishop h6. All systems are ready to go here with h5, with knight a4, black played rook e8, knight takes e4, and his opponent went with the bishop g7. After bishop g7, king g7, he decided to go with h5. He threatened h takes g6 followed by queen g6, by queen h6, sorry. He captured, played queen h6, and played rook to d to g1, beautifully sacrificing, because when his opponent played queen e7, same thing happens if rook e4, rook g6. He just sacrificed rook g6, h takes g6, queen h8, and rook h7. This is the game by famous actor, thanks to which this gambit got its name. Once again, it's called Humphrey Bogart Gambit. It was played in 1933, and just like you see, he wasn't only famous for his famous films at that time and everything else, but he was also a great chess player. I mean, I very much liked this game. I didn't have too many games of his to check, but the one that I checked and the one that I found, I liked it very much. There is a guy, Miller, who played most of these games in early 80s. I'm talking about correspondence game. If Humphrey Bogart played f3, this Miller guy played bishop g2. Take a look at the following two games, because he played like 2 games and within 2 years won 2 beautiful games with the bishop g2. This wasn't my intention to teach you bishop g2, but let me just show you. This is just to spread your attacking skills and knowledge about this line. In one game, his opponent played, of course, that everybody will play d5. And nowadays, I absolutely have no doubts about that. But if e5 happens, you play knight c3, bishop b4, you play queen to d3. Very original game. Wants to keep a healthy pawn structure with this queen taking on c3. So after bishop c3, queen takes c3. Very early, black decided to not just grab the pawn, but also to give up the bishop pair. It's fine, but I don't mind playing with white pieces like this. After d6, d takes, knight takes, played bishop d2. I like this move. It's a little bit unusual because we all like to place our pieces on the more active squares, but bishop e3 could be faced at some point with some knight g4, bishop f4 at some point with knight g6. Played long castle and played knight f3. Looks like the only good piece in black's game is about to be exchanged. So after knight f3, bishop f3, not just that. You've just opened up the g file for your actions. You have a queen that heads the g7 square. You got a bishop here, and you got this bishop that is going to go on h6. In the game was d5, rook g1, and f6. This guy played bishop h6, rook f7. And for all of you who plan to be a great chess players and who like to come up with, let's say, advanced type of tactics, white moves and wins. Boom. Rook takes d5 and Miller won. Great game. Shows how dangerous Humphrey Bogart Gambit could be, and also shows once again that everything depends on your creativity and good tactical skills. The point of this move is, once you take, you are pinned, and white is just threatening to take on g7. If queen takes, then you just take here, and after rook f8, rook g7, followed by queen f8 with mate. What happens if they play d5? If they play d5, knight c3, threatening that pawn, whether they play c6, just like previously, c6, c4, e6, e4. This guy played e6, like French similar type of game. e4, breaking in the center. Also threatening to take the knight on g4. Black played queen h4. White played queen e2 to defend on f2. Knight c6, which already looks shaky center for white. But a great move happened here. Knight b5, not so common in similar type of games. You defend the pawn on d4 and you threaten this pawn on c7. After bishop b4, c3, bishop a5, took on d5, played bishop f4, played bishop g3, started to chase this queen away, chased it away like crazy, and black resigned because he couldn't save the piece on g4. Another great game, another easy attack by white, and another correspondence game that ended up very, very fast. Finally, let's take a look at the move that presents my suggestion for you, and it's e4. After e4, they have knight f6, d5, or d6. Those who play knight f6, they play a la Kine, where they grab the g pawn, but being down a tempo. So we play e5, knight e5, c4, don't forget in a la Kine now they have d6 and then we play c4. We already play c4 and we play knight c3 or f4. Knight c3 would lead to an a la Kine 4 pawns attack where you don't have the g pawn. You can play some original stuff there, but I chose for you something interesting here. 4 pawns attack, and after e6, you have two possibilities. Take a look at this. Just because you don't have g2 pawn, they all of a sudden threaten very annoying queen h4 check. I found two games. One guy played normal knight f3 and won the game. That depends on your attacking skills and initiative skills afterwards on the king's side. White certainly is better. But I like this King's Gambit style move, knight c3. And after queen h4, king e2. You probably wonder what the hell. But look at this, knight c4. Now you're down 2 pawns. King is misplaced. This looks terrible, but everything is about to change in just few moves. With tempo, queen has to go back. With tempo, you threaten the knight. With tempo, you now have 3 pieces developed, open g-file and pretty strong pawns in the center. Queen c2, threatening to take on h7 if you like. You can also play f5. g6 to stop both, to prevent f5 and not to have hanging pawn on h7 anymore. Threatening h5. And now when they play h5, I would say, if I was black, I would say, if I was white, I would say, good. I certainly have some compensation, but I'm down 2 pawns, so I gotta react in a very aggressive fashion here. a4, chasing the knight away with a5. So the only move is a5. Knight g5, threatening bishop g6 and knight f7. And after queen e7, knight b5, which absolutely and terribly, actually, it puts black in terrible problems. You can develop this bishop because of knight c7. You can play c6 because of knight d6, and that's it. You can play, you probably have to play something like knight a6, in which case I believe that you're just one move away from mate, bishop d2 to control knight b4, and let's say they go like this, it's time to do it. Because if they take like this, you win on bishop g6. If they take like this, take on g6, and when they move the king, put another piece on the g file and just go with a crazy attack on the king's side and kill this guy. So this is an interesting game played between Baranovsky and Wrench. So instead of knight f6, another possibility could be when they accept and they try to defend the knight on g4 by bishop on c8, challenging the center with d5. You play bishop e2. They go knight f6, you play e5. They go knight e7. And here, there were so many moves used by white. I especially like bishop g5 that has a perfect score. I didn't choose this move because it has perfect score. I actually chose this line because it prevents easy development by black, forces f6, which could be bad, and I chose 2 games. In one game, black went for typical French idea with c5, knight c6, and after he played g6, h4. Very original position. This guy wants to play French, but he can't play e6. He had to finally play f6, but now he weakened the king's side and the light squares. After bishop e3, c4, knight bd2, now he played h5, brought this knight to g3, beautiful maneuvering by white, took by pawn, played queen c2, controlling the light squares and the diagonal, went with short castle, played rook to b1, jumped with the knight on e5, came up with knight g7, h6, and I'm just moving a little bit faster, but I especially like this knight sack, where he decided to open up the game on the king's side and played f4, and in just a couple of moves this guy resigned, bishop f5, queen e6, and he can stop f takes g5. Look at this completely cramped position, bad position of the king on f8, and you're just about to take on g5, and they did not have a good way to defend themselves. And another game after d5, bishop e2, knight d7, e5, and bishop g5 was with h6. Bishop h4, g5, e6. What a nice move that you all should be familiar with. It's a nice one because you're not trying to keep the material here. You actually want to sacrifice as much as you can. Thing is, they can't take because of checkmate, and thing is, they can't play g takes h4 because you wouldn't play anything else but this move. Bishop h5. I even think that you can come up with some e takes f7, bishop h3, knight f3, queen f3, and rook g1 mating ideas. That's why the guy played knight f6, e takes, and bishop g3. And just because of that intermediary move e6, we have to say that white has a more than satisfying game. King is in the middle of the board. They have lots of problems with the light squares. We certainly have a nice compensation. The end of the game was nice. Bishop f5, knight f3, h4, he broke the center, played h5, f3 in order to open the g-file. Played knight c3, chasing the bishop away, played long castle, took by pawn, played rook g1, played rook d on f1, knight e2, knight g6, and this crushing game ended up in a really, really great style. He threatened knight g6, threatening to take on c7, because probably this guy thought that if knight g6, king g8, at least knight on c7 would keep an eye on the e6 square. But a6 just won the game. So this was another great game for you, and it's time to check what happens when they play the main line, d6. This is a solid approach by most of the guys. Philosophy by black players could be, I grab the pawn, and now I just want to play solid paired type of game for black. So when you play bishop e2, knight f6, knight c3. This reminds me on bayonet attack against peers that we analyzed, and you can find that video. I believe I made it like 2 or 3 months ago. So let's take a look at the game. They can play g6, e6, and e5. I expect by most of your players 2 approaches, either g6 or e5. g6 go to paired type of positions, e5 goes to filader type of games. Let's take a look at e5. I chose a very nice example that is going to be very good for all of you who like to attack thanks to the open g-file. So rook g1, castles, bishop h6, knight e8, queen d2, and long castle. We almost have a winning attacking chances. I say almost because position is not winning, but certainly for all of you who have like nice creativity to attack, you will like it. Knight e5, king h8, you bring it back. Now you play knight c3. I wouldn't miss a chance to win the dark square bishop and to play with the bishop pair, because I have a feeling that that bishop is one of the crucial pieces in their defensive strategy. But in this game was nice. Knight c3, he brought the knight back, I don't know why. Played queen d4, played queen to a3, and just like you see, white continued to play a normal middle game, like he wasn't down a pawn. He was just happy with the fact that he had better development than the open g-file. f4, queen h2, now he was down 2 pawns. If bishop e5, I guess he wouldn't hesitate to play rook h1. So d takes e5, played f takes e5, rook g on f1, played e6, queen h3 to defend the pawn, and he was down like 2 pawns here. I'm not too impressed with second part of the game, but he eventually managed to win the game. The guy resigned at this point, because if you just take a hotter look, you're just going to realize that this position for black almost is collapsing. So after knight c3, I chose one more game because it's nice. This guy played e6, bishop g5, knight f3, bishop went back to d2, rook g1, bishop d3, Bishop went back to e3, and he broke the center with e5. I like these older games because in these older games, white showed very interesting and unusual ways of launching the attack. So after queen a5, knight e2, going to b3, that's how you in FIDE usually choose to defend yourself and the queen side with this knight d4, knight b3, or knight d2, knight b3 ideas. Knight a4, took on c5, and this was a beautiful tactical moment of the game because after bishop c5, knight c5, he threatened bishop c6 if knight takes. So knight f6, I don't know what was wrong just to give check and to win the queen on e5, but he didn't do it. Anyways, this position already looks terribly, terribly bad for these guys. I believe they have to play knight f6, but position looks hardly defendable. Queen e3, eyeing the rook on a7, knight on d7, everything looks bad about the black's game. And finally, what happens if they play this move g6? I expect by most of your opponents to play like this. After they play g6, I would suggest two approaches. One is pretty wild in my style, h4, h5, and when they play like this, knight h3, knight goes to g5, or bishop goes to g5 and knight goes to f4, because they never had bishop g4, knight g4 because of f3. Or another one that happened in this game that is a little bit unusual, but I found it very interesting and creative. Bishop g7, queen d2, h6, and grab the knight on f6. To give up the dark square bishops in these positions, it's crazy. Knight f3, bishop e6, castles, bishop h3, rook g1, especially the way he managed to break the king side here. Bishop g7 and played queen e3. Open up the rook on d1. Put the king into safety. Threaten to play e5. Opening up this rook. Eyeing this bishop on h3 as potential weakness. And that's exactly what happened. He played e5, breaking the center. The guy just thought, okay, maybe he just closed my center, but I'm a pawn up, and now my light square bishop is doing lots of nasty stuff on this diagonal. But then you play knight h4, threatening this bishop. And when the guy played queen c8, boom. I very much like this bishop h5 idea. You threaten to take on g6. You can take because of rook g7 and they collapse. So after bishop f8, bishop g6, and white was winning. The rest of the game is not even interesting. Black is just collapsing. And all things considered, I tried to somehow be very fast and to show you as many modal games as I chose for you today. But all things considered, I hope that you enjoyed this lecture, and I hope that you enjoyed this gambit. Once again, thanks to a famous actor who played one game and I showed you, we have nowadays this gambit, and it's of like great experience and also thing to use for so many players, including some of the top guys. And just you could have seen even MWL played it recently, Timur Garev and some other guys. Guys, wish you the best of luck with this gambit and enjoy your stuff. Bye bye, see you soon.